3 months ago, my husband stripped me of everything in our divorce. Our mansion in Willowbrook Heights, the vacation home in Coral Bay, even my grandmother's jewelry collection. What he doesn't know is that I've been quietly building a secret empire worth $50 million, and today, his world is about to crumble. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. But let me start from the beginning, when I still believed I was living the perfect life. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our penthouse as I arranged fresh white orchids in the crystal vase, the same ritual I'd performed every Tuesday for the past 8 years. Everything had to be perfect for when Damien returned from his business conferences. The marble countertops gleamed, the Italian leather furniture was positioned just so, and dinner reservations at Le Bernardin were confirmed for 7:30. "Mrs. Ashford, the dry cleaning has arrived," announced Carmen, our housekeeper, as she hung Damien's designer suits in the walk-in closet. Each suit cost more than most people made in a month, but that was simply our reality. Damien Ashford was the golden boy of Meridian Financial Group, the youngest partner in the firm's history, and I was his devoted wife who made sure his world ran like clockwork. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror one final time. At 32, I still looked like the ambitious marketing executive Damien had fallen for at a charity gala 9 years ago. My auburn hair fell in perfect waves. My emerald dress, his favorite color, hugged my figure flawlessly, and my smile radiated the kind of contentment that came from having everything a woman could want. Or so I thought. The penthouse overlooked Manhattan's most exclusive district, where we rubbed shoulders with senators, tech moguls, and old money families whose names graced museum wings. Our life was a carefully curated Instagram post come to life, exotic vacations to the Maldives, front-row seats at Fashion Week, charity galas where we donated amounts that made headlines. I had transformed from small-town girl to society wife seamlessly, and everyone envied what we had built together. "The car service just texted," I called to Carmen. "Mr. Ashford's flight landed early. He'll be home within the hour." I felt that familiar flutter of excitement. 3 weeks apart was the longest we'd been separated since our honeymoon in Santorini. Damien's career demanded these extended trips, this time to secure a merger with a European investment firm, but the distance always made our reunion sweeter. I'd planned every detail of his homecoming, his favorite meal from Nobu, the vintage wine he'd been saving for a special occasion, and the silk negligee hidden beneath my conservative dinner dress. My phone buzzed with notifications from the wives' group chat. Priya was complaining about her husband's gambling again, while Bethany shared photos from their new yacht. These women were my social circle, my chosen family since I'd moved to New York. We lunched at exclusive clubs, planned fundraisers for causes that made us feel purposeful, and supported each other through the unique challenges of being married to powerful men. "You're so lucky, Cassandra," Bethany had told me just last week over champagne at the Met Gala after-party. "Damien worships you. Most of these men collect wives like art pieces, but he only has eyes for you." I had preened under the compliment, secure in my marriage's strength. While other couples in our circle divorced messily, fighting over assets and custody in public spectacles, Damien and I were the golden couple. We finished each other's sentences, shared inside jokes from our early dating days, and still held hands at dinner parties. Other wives confided their suspicions about affairs and secret accounts, but I trusted Damien completely. The sound of his key in the door made my heart race like a teenager's. I smoothed my dress and positioned myself in the foyer, ready to welcome home the man who'd made all my dreams come true. "Darling, you're early," I called out, my voice echoing in the marble entryway. But when the door opened, Damien's expression wasn't the warm smile I expected. His blue eyes, the ones that had captivated me across that crowded gala dance floor, looked right through me as if I were a stranger. His designer luggage hit the floor with an expensive thud, and for the first time in our 9-year relationship, he didn't immediately reach for me. "We need to talk, Cassandra." His voice carried a cold formality I'd never heard before. "Sit down." The orchids seemed to mock me as I followed him to the living room, their pristine petals a stark contrast to the sudden chaos blooming in my chest. This wasn't how the scene was supposed to play out. This wasn't the script we'd followed for nearly a decade of blissful marriage. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. As I perched on the edge of our Italian leather sofa, the one we'd spent weeks selecting together, I had no idea that in the next few minutes, the life I'd spent 8 years perfecting would shatter like the crystal champagne flutes we'd toasted with on our wedding night. The man I'd loved, trusted, and built an empire with was about to reveal that everything I believed about our life together was an elaborate lie. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. Alright, let's get back to it. Damien poured himself a scotch, the expensive single malt we'd been saving for our 10th anniversary, and didn't offer me one. In 9 years together, he'd never excluded me from his evening ritual. My stomach twisted as I watched him down the amber liquid in one gulp, his jaw clenched tight. "The Hendricks merger fell through," he said finally, his back still turned to me. "The Europeans pulled out at the last minute." Relief flooded through me. Business disappointment that I could handle, that I could fix with comfort and encouragement, the way I always had. "Oh, darling, I'm so sorry. But you know what they say about doors closing and windows opening. Maybe this just means something better is—" "Cassandra, stop." His voice cut through my attempted comfort like a blade. "Just stop with the motivational wife routine." The words hit me like a physical blow. Motivational wife routine? That stung more than it should have. I'd been his biggest supporter through every career challenge, every late night, every missed dinner when deals demanded his attention. "I don't understand what you mean by that." I kept my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly as I smoothed my dress. "I'm trying to support you through a disappointment." He laughed, but it wasn't the warm sound I'd fallen in love with. This laugh was bitter, almost cruel. "Support?" "Right, like when you supported me by maxing out our Amex Black Card last month on that charity luncheon? That was for the Children's Hospital fundraiser. You told me to spare no expense. Or when you supported me by buying that ridiculous sculpture for the foyer without asking?" My mouth fell open. "The Pemberton piece? You said it was an excellent investment. You bragged about it to your colleagues at the Rothschild dinner." "Everything's always about appearances with you, isn't it?" Damien turned to face me then, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before: contempt. "The perfect wife, the perfect home, the perfect charitable causes. It's all just performance." The room felt like it was tilting. This wasn't the man who'd proposed to me on the Brooklyn Bridge at sunset, who'd cried when I'd walked down the aisle, who'd held me through my mother's funeral last year. "Damien, what's happening? You're scaring me. Did something else happen in London? Are you in some kind of trouble?" He set down his glass and ran his hands through his dark hair, a nervous habit I'd learned to recognize over the years. But instead of the vulnerability it usually revealed, now it seemed like frustration. "The partners had a meeting while I was gone," he said quietly, "about restructuring. About cutting dead weight." My heart stopped. "Dead weight? But you're the youngest partner in the firm's history. Your client portfolio is worth—" "My client portfolio is worth exactly what the clients decide it's worth. And lately, several major accounts have been expressing concerns." "What kind of concerns?" "The kind that make partners question whether I'm the right fit for the direction they want to take the firm." I stood up, moving toward him instinctively. This was the real issue, not some failed merger, but threats to his position at Meridian Financial. I could work with this. We could strategize together, the way we always had. "Okay, so we make a plan. You know I'm good at reading people. Remember the Steinberg account? I helped you navigate that personality conflict with—" "I don't need your help." The words exploded from him with such force that I stumbled backward. I don't need you trying to manage my career like you manage our social calendar. This isn't something you can fix with the right wine pairing or by charming someone's wife at a dinner party. Tears pricked my eyes. I was only trying to... To what? To solve all my problems with your little networking tricks? To turn this into another one of your projects? He shook his head, and for a moment he looked almost disgusted. You have no idea what real pressure looks like, Cassandra. You've never had to earn anything in your life. The accusation hung between us like poison gas. Never had to earn anything? I'd worked 60-hour weeks at my marketing firm before our marriage. I'd climbed from junior account executive to senior director before I'd given it all up to support his career moves. That's not fair, and you know it. I sacrificed my career so you could pursue yours without limitations. I gave up the promotion at Sullivan & Associates so we could move to Manhattan when Meridian offered you the partnership track. Right, you sacrificed, he said, making air quotes. You traded a middle management marketing job for a life of luxury. Real sacrifice there. Each word was carefully chosen to wound, and they hit their target perfectly. This wasn't disappointment talking. This was cruelty. Deliberate, calculated cruelty from the man who'd promised to love and cherish me. Why are you being like this? My voice cracked despite my efforts to stay composed. We're supposed to be a team. We've always been a team. Damien walked to the window overlooking Central Park, the same view we'd marveled at when we'd first toured this penthouse. His reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. Maybe that's the problem, Cassandra. Maybe I'm tired of being half of a team where only one person actually earns the victories. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of implications I wasn't ready to understand. Something fundamental had shifted in our relationship, something that went deeper than business stress or temporary setbacks. But I still believed this was fixable. I still thought we were just having our first real fight as a married couple, and that by morning, we'd be laughing about it over coffee and croissants like we always did. I had no idea that this was just the beginning, that the man I trusted with my whole heart was already 3 steps ahead in a game I didn't even know we were playing. The next morning, I woke up alone. Damien's side of the bed was cold, untouched. I found him in his study, still wearing yesterday's clothes, surrounded by scattered legal documents and empty coffee cups. The sight of him hunched over his laptop, looking haggard and desperate, sent a chill through my chest. "Did you sleep at all?" I asked softly, setting a fresh cup of coffee beside him. He didn't look up. "We need to discuss our financial situation." "Our finances are fine, aren't they? I mean, the Meridian partnership pays well, and we have the investment portfolio." "Sit down, Cassandra." His tone was clinical, like he was addressing a client rather than his wife. "There are things you don't know, things I should have told you months ago." I lowered myself into the leather chair across from his desk, the same chair where I'd planned surprise parties and discussed vacation destinations. Now it felt like I was facing a firing squad. Damien finally looked up, and I was shocked by what I saw. His eyes were bloodshot, his usually perfect hair disheveled, and there was something in his expression that looked almost like guilt. "The partnership at Meridian," he began slowly, "it's not what you think it is. It never was." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been living on borrowed time for the past 2 years. The Pemberton account, the one that supposedly made my career, I lost it 18 months ago. The client pulled out after discovering some irregularities in my management of their portfolio. My world tilted. Irregularities? What kind of irregularities?" "The kind that should have gotten me fired." He rubbed his face with both hands. "But Richard Pemberton and I had a history, golf partners, social circles. He agreed not to press charges if I could quietly replace the missing funds." "Missing funds?" The words came out as a whisper. "Damien, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I borrowed against client accounts to cover some personal investments that went bad, cryptocurrency mainly. I thought I could make it back before anyone noticed." He laughed bitterly. "I was wrong." The room started spinning. My perfect husband, my ethical, successful, admirable husband, was confessing to embezzlement. How much? Initially, $3 million. But with interest and penalties, he pulled out a document and slid it across the desk. $7.2 million. I stared at the number until it blurred. $7 million. More money than some people would see in a lifetime. But we have assets, I stammered. The penthouse alone is worth $4 million. The vacation home, the cars, my jewelry, all mortgaged. All of it. Damien's voice was flat. I've been using our assets as collateral for loans to cover the payments to Pemberton. We're not wealthy, Cassandra. We haven't been for 2 years. We're broke. That's impossible. The credit cards, the dinners, the charity donations. All debt. All smoke and mirrors to maintain appearances while I tried to figure out how to fix this mess. I felt like I was drowning. But your salary barely covers the minimum payments on what we owe. And now, he pulled out another document, Meridian is conducting a full audit. They're going to discover everything. When? They started yesterday. I have maybe a week before they figure out the extent of the damage. I stood up so quickly the chair nearly toppled. A week? A week? And you're just telling me now? I thought I could handle it. I thought I could fix it without dragging you into. Dragging me into it? I'm your wife. This affects both of us. Rage flooded through me, hot and pure. How could you keep this from me for 2 years? Because I knew you'd react like this. I knew you'd panic and make everything worse. Make everything worse? How could it possibly be worse than $7 million in debt and impending criminal charges? Damien stood up and walked to the window, his back to me. Because there's more. More. The word hit me like a physical blow. What more could there possibly be? The audit isn't just about my accounts. They're looking at everything, including the charitable foundation. My blood turned to ice. The Ashford Children's Foundation? What does that have to do with anything? The foundation that you chair, that you've been so proud of, that's raised over $2 million for children's hospitals. He turned around, and I saw something in his face that made me want to run. It's been my personal ATM for the past year. No, the word escaped as barely a breath. No, you didn't. I had access to the accounts. I was going to pay it back. You stole from sick children? I was screaming now, all pretense of composure abandoned. You stole charity money meant for children's cancer treatments? I borrowed it. I was going to replace every penny once the crypto investments. Don't you dare call it borrowing. You stole from dying children to cover your gambling debts. It wasn't gambling. It was calculated investment. Shut up! I hurled the coffee cup at the wall, watching it explode in a shower of ceramic and brown liquid. Just shut up with your justifications. You're a thief, a criminal. You've destroyed everything. Damien's mask finally slipped completely. Everything? What everything? Our fake life? Our image? Our social standing? His voice turned vicious. At least I tried to fix it. At least I tried to maintain what we had instead of just shopping and planning parties while the real world collapsed around us. I trusted you. I gave up everything for you. You gave up a mediocre marketing job to live in luxury. Don't act like you made some noble sacrifice. I made that sacrifice because I loved you, because I believed in us. Well, maybe you shouldn't have. The words came out cold and final. Maybe you should have kept your little career and your little apartment and your little life, because this, he gestured around the study, around our home, around our entire existence, is over. The silence that followed was deafening. We stared at each other across the wreckage of our marriage, and I realized that the man I'd loved for 9 years, the man I'd built my entire adult life around, was a stranger. Worse than a stranger, he was a criminal who'd used my love and trust as cover for his crimes. They're going to arrest you, I said quietly. Probably. And they'll seize our assets. All of them. Including my jewelry, my grandmother's pearls that have been in my family for 4 generations. He nodded. Everything we own is considered part of the criminal enterprise now. I walked to the door, then turned back to look at him one last time. I want you out of this house by tonight. Cassandra! Out! I screamed. Get out before I call the police myself. As I slammed the study door behind me, leaving him with his legal documents and his schemes, I realized that the perfect life I'd spent 8 years building was not just over, it had never existed at all. The knock on the door came at 6:47 a.m., exactly 1 week after Damien's confession. I'd been expecting it, but that didn't make the sound any less terrifying as it echoed through our empty penthouse. Damien had moved out 3 days ago, taking only a suitcase and leaving behind the wreckage of our life together. Federal agents, the voice was authoritative, final. We have a warrant. I wrapped my silk robe tighter around myself and opened the door to find 6 people in dark suits holding badges and boxes. The lead agent, a stern woman with silver hair, stepped forward. Mrs. Ashford? I'm Agent Rebecca Torres with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We have a warrant to search these premises and seize any assets connected to the ongoing investigation into Meridian Financial Group. I stepped aside wordlessly as they filed into my home, our home, and began systematically dismantling everything we'd built together. They photographed every room, cataloged every piece of furniture, every painting, every decorative object. One agent carefully removed my grandmother's pearls from their velvet box, sealing them in an evidence bag, like they were contraband. Ma'am, we'll need you to vacate the premises by noon, Agent Torres informed me as her team worked. The property is being seized pending resolution of the criminal case. Where am I supposed to go? The question came out smaller than I intended. That's not our concern, ma'am, but I'd suggest you contact a lawyer. A lawyer. Except our lawyer was Gregory Whitman, senior partner at Whitman & Associates, who'd been sending Damien increasingly frantic calls that went unanswered. Gregory, who'd handled our estate planning, our real estate transactions, our prenup, a prenup that was now completely meaningless since everything we'd accumulated during the marriage was built on stolen money. I retreated to our bedroom, my bedroom, and watched through the window as news vans began gathering on the street below. Somehow, word had already leaked. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, from our society friends, from my mother in Ohio who'd seen the morning news. I couldn't bring myself to answer any of them. By 10 a.m., the story was everywhere. Society wife's charity scam exposed, screamed the headline on page 6. Millionaire couple's double life unraveled, proclaimed the Financial Times. The photos they used were from last month's Children's Hospital Gala. Me in my emerald Valentino gown, smiling radiantly as I presented a check for $300,000. Money that had been stolen from the very organization we were supposedly supporting. The irony was so sick it made me physically ill. My phone rang again. This time it was Bethany from our wives group. Cassandra, oh my God, are you okay? The news is saying... It's all true, I cut her off. Every word of it. Silence stretched across the line. Then, how could you not know? How could you live with someone for 8 years and not know they were? A criminal? A thief? A liar? My voice was hollow. I don't know, Bethany. I honestly don't know. But the charity money, Cassandra, that was supposed to go to the children's cancer ward. My cousin's daughter was supposed to benefit from that funding. The accusation in her voice hit me like a slap. I didn't know. I thought I was helping. I thought we were making a difference. How can we believe that? How can anyone believe that the wife of... I hung up before she could finish. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with text messages from the other wives. Not messages of support or concern, but distancing themselves from the scandal. Invitations being rescinded. Charity board positions being reconsidered. Social death happening in real time. By 11 a.m., I had packed 2 suitcases with whatever personal items the FBI hadn't seized. My clothes, some photographs, my mother's wedding ring. One of the few things that predated my marriage and therefore couldn't be confiscated. Everything else, the furniture, the art, the dinnerware we'd selected together, the books, the wine collection, all of it belonged to the government now. Carmen, our housekeeper, found me sitting on the floor of the empty walk-in closet, surrounded by the detritus of my former life. "Mrs. Ashford, I'm so sorry," she said softly. "I had no idea, none of us did." "I know, Carmen, none of this is your fault." "What will you do now?" I looked up at her, this woman who'd cleaned our home, prepared our meals, listened to my excited chatter about dinner parties and vacation plans. She'd been more of a confidant than I'd realized, and now I was about to lose her too. "I honestly don't know." She pressed an envelope into my hands. "This is from your husband. He came by yesterday when you were at the lawyer's office. He asked me to give it to you today." I stared at the envelope, bearing my name in Damien's familiar handwriting. Did he say anything else? He looked broken, Mrs. Ashford, really broken. Like he'd aged 10 years. I tucked the letter into my purse without opening it. I wasn't ready to read whatever justifications or apologies or explanations he thought could make any of this better. The final humiliation came as I wheeled my suitcases through the lobby of our building. Mrs. Patterson from the penthouse next door, the woman who'd complimented my flower arrangements just last week, literally crossed to the other side of the hallway to avoid me. The doorman who'd greeted me with warm smiles for 8 years couldn't meet my eyes. Outside, the photographers were waiting. Flashes exploded in my face as reporters shouted questions. "Did you know about your husband's crimes? Are you facing charges too? How do you feel about stealing from sick children?" I pushed through the crowd, dragging my suitcases behind me, and hailed a taxi. As we pulled away from Willowbrook Heights, from the building where I'd lived as Mrs. Damien Ashford, society wife and philanthropist, I caught a glimpse of myself in the taxi's window reflection. I looked like a stranger, a homeless stranger carrying everything she owned in 2 suitcases. "Where to, lady?" the driver asked. That was the question, wasn't it? Where does someone go when their entire life has been revealed as an elaborate fraud? When their marriage, their home, their social circle, their very identity has been built on stolen money? I gave him the address of a budget hotel in Queens, the only place I could afford with the $800 in cash I'd found in my jewelry box. As Manhattan disappeared behind us, I realized that at 32 years old, I was starting over with less than I'd had when I graduated college. Except for one thing Damien didn't know about, one thing the FBI hadn't found. One secret I'd been keeping for the past 5 years, a secret that was about to change everything. But first, I had to survive hitting rock bottom. The Starlight Motel in Queens smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. My room, if you could call it that, was smaller than our penthouse walk-in closet, with beige carpet that had seen better decades and a bathroom door that didn't quite close properly. The neon sign outside my window flickered intermittently, casting pink light across the water-stained walls every few seconds. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed, still wearing the designer jeans and cashmere sweater I'd thrown on that morning when the FBI arrived. Everything about my appearance screamed wealth and privilege, making me stick out like a beacon among the other residents of this place. Truck drivers catching a few hours of sleep, people down on their luck, women who looked like they'd been running from something for a long time. 3 days had passed since I'd been forced from my home. 3 days of living on gas station coffee and vending machine sandwiches because I was terrified to spend any of my rapidly dwindling cash. I'd managed to stretch the $800 to cover 4 nights at the motel, but after that, I had no idea. The lawyer I'd finally managed to hire, a public defender named Marcus Chen, who took my case pro bono after every respectable firm in the city refused to represent me, had delivered the final devastating blow that afternoon. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Ashford, but there's no good news," he'd said over the phone, his voice tired and defeated. The prenup you signed actually works against you in this situation. Since you can't prove you were unaware of your husband's criminal activities, you're not entitled to any spousal support. In fact, there's talk of charging you as an accessory. An accessory? I didn't know anything. That's what you say, but the prosecution argues that no wife could live that lifestyle without knowing something was wrong. They're building a case that you were willfully blind to enable the crimes. That's insane. I loved him. I trusted him completely. Mrs. Ashford, love and trust don't hold up in court. Evidence does. And right now, all the evidence points to you living luxuriously off stolen money for years. After he hung up, I'd sat in this dingy room and finally allowed myself to cry. Not the elegant tears of a woman dealing with marital troubles, but ugly, devastating sobs that shook my entire body. I cried for the woman I'd been just a week ago. Confident, beloved, purposeful. I cried for the children who wouldn't get their cancer treatments because of money we'd stolen. I cried for my grandmother's pearls, locked away in some evidence locker. I cried for the complete destruction of everything I'd thought was real. When the tears finally stopped, I was left with something worse than grief, absolute emptiness. I'd been Mrs. Damien Ashford for so long that I'd forgotten who Cassandra Sullivan was. Before the marriage, before the society life, before the penthouse and the charity galas and the designer clothes. Who was I when stripped of everything that had defined me for the past 8 years? I was nobody. A woman with no skills that translated to the real world, no savings that weren't tainted by crime, no friends who weren't fair-weather socialites, no family except a mother in Ohio who'd already made it clear she was too embarrassed to talk right now. My phone had died hours ago, and I couldn't bring myself to plug it in. Every time it was on, it buzzed with calls from reporters, angry messages from people whose charity donations had been stolen, and, worst of all, silence from anyone who might actually care about me as a person rather than as a scandal. The room next to mine had thin walls, and I could hear my neighbor, a woman who'd introduced herself as Rita when I'd arrived, talking on her phone about shift schedules at some factory. Rita looked to be about my age, but life had worn her down in ways that my privileged existence never could have imagined. She worked 2 jobs to support her kids, had been evicted from her apartment, and was staying here until she could scrape together enough for a new place. The contrast was devastating. Rita was fighting to keep her family together and build a life despite impossible circumstances. I was wallowing in self-pity because my life of stolen luxury had been exposed. But the worst part, the absolute rock-bottom moment, came when I opened Damien's letter. I'd been carrying it around for 3 days, unable to face whatever manipulation or false remorse it contained. But sitting in this motel room with nowhere lower to fall, I finally tore open the envelope. The letter was surprisingly short. Cassandra, by the time you read this, you'll know everything. I won't insult you with apologies or explanations. There aren't any that matter. I destroyed us both with my greed and my cowardice. I need you to know that none of this was your fault. You were exactly the wife I wanted you to be. Trusting, supportive, beautiful. You made me feel like I deserved the life we were living, even when I knew I was stealing it. I've already pled guilty to all charges. The prosecutors have agreed not to pursue charges against you in exchange for my full cooperation. You're free, Cassandra. Free to build whatever life you want without the shadow of my crimes. I know you'll never forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I hope someday you'll understand that losing you is a punishment worse than anything the courts can give me. The woman you were when I met you, before I corrupted everything, she was extraordinary. Find her again. Damien. P.S. I never looked in your jewelry box behind the false bottom. Whatever you kept there is still yours. I read the letter 3 times before the last line hit me. My jewelry box. The false bottom I'd installed years ago. The secret I'd been keeping that even Damien, in all his snooping and scheming, had never discovered. For the first time in 3 days, I felt something other than despair. I felt possibility. I walked to my suitcase and pulled out the small jewelry box I'd managed to pack, the one item the FBI hadn't been interested in because it appeared to contain only costume jewelry. I'd had it since college, a gift from my grandmother along with her pearls. My hands shook as I pressed the hidden catch. The false bottom popped open, revealing what I'd hidden there 5 years ago and had been secretly nurturing ever since. A single flash drive, a business registration certificate, and a bank routing number to an account in the Cayman Islands. The secret that was about to change everything. Because while Damien had been playing with stolen millions and destroying our life, I'd been quietly building an empire of my own. An empire worth $50 million that he'd never known about. And tomorrow, I was going to start taking back control of my life. I clutched the flash drive in my trembling hands, staring at it like it was a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman, which, in many ways, it was. The small piece of technology contained access to something I'd been building in secret for 5 years. A digital empire that existed completely separate from my life as Mrs. Damien Ashford. It had started innocently enough in 2018 during one of Damien's longer business trips to Singapore. I'd been bored, lonely, and tired of the endless cycle of charity lunches and shopping excursions that filled my days. On a whim, I'd signed up for an online course in digital marketing, using my maiden name and a separate email address I'd created just for fun. The course led to another, then another. Digital marketing became social media strategy, which became content creation, which became something I'd never expected. Genuine expertise in building online businesses. But it wasn't until I discovered cryptocurrency and NFT trading that things had really taken off. While Damien thought I was spending my days at Pilates classes and museum board meetings, I'd been studying blockchain technology, learning about digital assets, and slowly, carefully, building a portfolio that existed entirely in the digital space. I'd used my own name, my maiden name, Cassandra Sullivan, and a separate identity that had nothing to do with the Ashford family fortune. Because even then, some instinct had told me to keep this separate, to have something that was mine alone. I'd started small, investing the modest inheritance from my grandmother that I'd never told Damien about, $50,000 that had been sitting in a savings account since before our marriage. Through careful research, strategic timing, and what I now realized was probably a natural talent for reading market trends, I'd grown that initial investment into something extraordinary. The flash drive contained the keys to digital wallets holding cryptocurrency worth millions. It held the passwords to social media accounts with hundreds of thousands of followers who knew me as CryptoQueen_CS, a mysterious trader who'd made a fortune in early Bitcoin and Ethereum investments. It contained the login information for an online consulting business that helped other women learn cryptocurrency trading, generating 6-figure monthly revenues. Most importantly, it held the documentation for my greatest achievement, a decentralized investment fund I'd launched 2 years ago that had attracted over $40 million from investors around the world. These were people who'd never heard of Cassandra Ashford, the society wife. They only knew Cassandra Sullivan, the brilliant crypto analyst who'd predicted 3 major market shifts and helped thousands of women achieve financial independence. All of it completely legal, all of it completely mine, all of it earning money while I'd been playing the perfect wife to a criminal. I plugged the flash drive into the ancient laptop I'd bought from a pawn shop that afternoon, my first purchase as a woman starting over. As the files loaded, I felt something I hadn't experienced in days: hope. My crypto portfolio alone was worth $32 million. The consulting business had generated $8 million in profit over the past 3 years. The investment fund held another $15 million in assets under management, earning me substantial fees. $55 million. All mine. All earned through my own intelligence, research, and risk-taking. all completely hidden from the FBI's investigation because it existed in a digital space that predated my marriage and had no connection to Damien's crimes. But it wasn't just about the money. As I scrolled through the messages from my online community, women who called me their mentor, their inspiration, their guide to financial freedom, I realized something profound. I hadn't just been building wealth in secret. I'd been building an identity, a purpose, a version of myself that was strong, independent, and valuable entirely on her own merits. CryptoQueen_CS had over 800,000 followers across various platforms. Her investment advice had been featured in major financial publications. Her online courses had helped thousands of women escape financial dependence on men who, it turned out, weren't as reliable as they'd seemed. The irony was almost laughable. While my husband had been stealing money to maintain our facade of wealth, I'd been legitimately earning more than he'd ever made. While he'd been lying and cheating and destroying people's lives, I'd been creating value and empowering others. I spent the next 6 hours immersed in my digital world, catching up on market movements, responding to urgent messages from my business partners, and reviewing the performance of my investment fund. It was like slipping back into a skin that fit perfectly, a skin I'd forgotten I was wearing underneath the designer clothes and perfect wife persona. My consulting business had been running itself through automated systems and a small team of virtual assistants I'd hired through cryptocurrency payments. The investment fund was managed by a brilliant algorithm I'd developed with the help of some MIT graduates I'd connected with online. Everything had continued generating money, even while my real life was imploding. As dawn broke over Queens, painting the motel room in soft pink light, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done hiding. Done pretending to be less than I was. Done allowing other people to define my worth and my future. Cassandra Ashford, the society wife, the charity chairwoman, the woman who'd been fooled by her criminal husband, was finished. She'd served her purpose and learned her lessons. But Cassandra Sullivan, the crypto expert, the business owner, the woman who'd built a fortune through intelligence and hard work, she was just getting started. I opened my laptop and began typing a new blog post for my followers. To my incredible community, you may have seen my name in the news recently in connection with my ex-husband's crimes. I want to be completely transparent. I was deceived just as you were. The difference is that you only lost money. I lost everything I thought was real. But here's what they don't understand. What's real can't be stolen. My knowledge, my skills, my network, my digital assets, all of it remains intact. All of it was built by me, for me, and belongs only to me. I'm emerging from this stronger and more committed than ever to our mission, helping women achieve financial independence so they never have to depend on anyone else for their security. Over the next few weeks, I'll be sharing my complete strategy for building wealth in the digital economy. I'll show you exactly how I grew a small inheritance into an 8-figure portfolio. I'll teach you how to protect your assets from anyone who might try to steal them, whether that's a criminal husband, a corrupt government, or an unjust legal system. Most importantly, I'll prove that the most powerful thing you can have in this world isn't a rich husband or a prestigious address. It's the knowledge that you can create your own empire on your own terms, using nothing but your intelligence and determination. The old Cassandra is gone. The new one is just beginning. Are you ready to join me? CS. I hit publish and watched as responses began flooding in within minutes. Women sharing their own stories of betrayal and recovery, offers of support, expressions of admiration for my resilience. For the first time in days, I smiled. Not the careful, practiced smile of a society wife, but the genuine grin of a woman who just remembered exactly how powerful she was. The empire I'd built in secret was about to become my weapon of choice, and the world was about to learn what happened when you underestimated Cassandra Sullivan. Within 48 hours of my blog post going live, everything changed. My story had exploded across social media, but not in the way I had expected. Instead of the scandal-hungry mob that had been attacking me, I found myself at the center of a movement. Hashtag Cassandra Sullivan was trending on Twitter. Women were sharing their own stories of financial deception, divorce, devastation, and secret empires they'd built to protect themselves. My followers had grown by 200,000 in 2 days, and my inbox was flooded with interview requests from legitimate financial publications. Not tabloids looking for scandal, but serious business magazines interested in my investment strategies. I was still staying at the Starlight Motel, but now it was by choice rather than necessity. I'd liquidated just enough cryptocurrency to secure a war chest of liquid cash, and I was using the motel as my temporary headquarters while I planned my next moves. The contrast was deliberate. Conducting multi-million-dollar deals from a $60 a night room was exactly the kind of power move that resonated with my audience. "Are you really doing this from a motel in Queens?" asked Jessica Park, the finance reporter from Bloomberg, who was interviewing me via video call. "Absolutely," I replied, making sure the water-stained wall was visible behind me. "When your husband steals everything you thought you owned, you either let it destroy you or you remember who you really are. I chose the latter." Our readers want to know, how did you hide a $55 million empire from your husband for 5 years? "I didn't hide it, I built it. There's a difference." I leaned forward, speaking directly into the camera. Every woman should have resources that exist entirely independent of their spouse. Not because they plan to divorce, but because financial independence is the foundation of every other kind of freedom. The interview was scheduled to run in the next day's edition, but clips were already circulating online. My consultation waiting list had grown to over 500 women, each willing to pay $2,000 for a 1-hour session on cryptocurrency investment and asset protection strategies. But the real victory came when I received an unexpected phone call from my lawyer, Marcus Chen. "Cassandra, I have some interesting news," he said, his voice carrying a note of amazement. "The prosecution wants to meet." "To arrest me?" "Quite the opposite. They want to discuss a partnership." It turned out that my Bloomberg interview had caught the attention of the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Specifically, Agent Rebecca Torres, the same woman who'd supervised the raid on my penthouse, had been following my online presence and was impressed by what she'd discovered. "Mrs. Ashford, or should I say Miss Sullivan, we've thoroughly investigated your digital assets," Agent Torres explained during our meeting at her office the next day. "Everything checks out. Your cryptocurrency holdings, your business operations, your investment fund. All completely legitimate and separate from your ex-husband's criminal enterprise." "I told you I didn't know about his crimes." "Yes, but more importantly, we've realized you might be able to help us recover some of the stolen funds." She slid a folder across the table. "Your ex-husband moved approximately $3 million through various cryptocurrency exchanges. Our cybercrime unit has been struggling to trace these transactions, but your expertise in the digital currency space could be invaluable." I opened the folder to find printouts of blockchain transactions, wallet addresses, and exchange records. It took me less than 5 minutes to identify the pattern Damien had used to try to hide the money. He used a mixing service to obfuscate the trail, but he made 3 critical errors, I explained, pointing to specific transactions. First, he used the same wallet to make multiple deposits. Second, he didn't wait long enough between transactions to truly anonymize them. Third, he withdrew everything to the same final address, which I can almost guarantee is connected to an exchange account in his real name. Agent Torres stared at me. "You figured that out in 5 minutes?" "I've been tracking cryptocurrency movements for years. This is actually pretty sloppy work." I looked up from the papers. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Consultation work. We pay you a significant fee to help us trace cryptocurrency transactions in this case and potentially others. Your cooperation would also ensure that all charges against you are formally dropped, and that you receive a letter clearing your name." "What kind of significant fee?" $200,000 for this case. with the possibility of ongoing work. I pretended to consider it, though I'd already decided. I'll do it, but I have conditions. What conditions? First, I want a public statement from the FBI acknowledging that I was a victim of my husband's crimes, not a co-conspirator. Second, I want permission to discuss my consulting work with the FBI in interviews and on my social media platforms. Third, I want you to help me recover my grandmother's pearls. They were seized with everything else, but they're family heirlooms that predate my marriage. Agent Torres nodded slowly. I think we can arrange all of that. The official announcement came 3 days later. FBI enlists cryptocurrency expert to trace stolen funds. The press release specifically identified me as a legitimate businesswoman who was deceived by her criminal husband, and praised my cooperation in helping to return money to the victims of the charity fraud. The vindication was sweeter than I'd imagined. Suddenly, the same reporters who'd been painting me as a co-conspirator were writing stories about my expertise and resilience. The society wives who'd shunned me were sending conciliatory text messages that I ignored. My mother called for the first time since the scandal broke, tearfully apologizing for her earlier coldness. But the real victory was the ripple effect it created in my business. Within a week of the FBI announcement, my investment fund had attracted $15 million in new deposits. 3 major corporations had reached out about consulting contracts. A publisher had offered me a 7-figure advance for a book about cryptocurrency investing and financial independence. I celebrated by doing something I'd dreamed about for days. I checked out of the Starlight Motel and into a luxury suite at the Ritz-Carlton, not because I needed the status, but because I could afford it with money I'd earned myself. Rita, my neighbor from the motel, helped me carry my suitcases to the taxi. "You sure you're going to be okay up there with all those rich folks?" she asked with a grin. "Rita, I think I'm exactly where I belong, but you have my number. If you ever want to learn about cryptocurrency investing, your first consultation is free." Cryptocurrency? Girl, I can barely afford groceries. That's exactly why you need to learn. Small investments, properly managed, become big investments. Trust me on this. As my taxi pulled away from the Starlight Motel, I opened my laptop and checked my portfolio balance. In the 7 days since I'd revealed my secret empire, my net worth had grown by another $12 million. Market movements, new business, and strategic investments had all combined to prove that my success wasn't luck, it was skill. But this was still just the beginning. I'd proven I could survive betrayal and public humiliation. I'd shown that I could rebuild from nothing. Now it was time to show what happened when I used my full power. Damien had stolen millions from charity and destroyed our life together. Tomorrow I was going to start showing him what real wealth looked like, and what happened when you underestimated the woman he'd married. 6 weeks after my public emergence, I was standing in the boardroom of Sterling Capital Management, one of Manhattan's most prestigious investment firms, presenting my cryptocurrency strategy to a room full of men who managed billions in traditional assets. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just 2 months ago, I'd been sitting in this same building's lobby as a society wife waiting for her husband to finish business meetings that I now knew were probably attempts to cover his tracks. "Miss Sullivan," said Richard Blackstone, Sterling's managing partner, "your track record speaks for itself, but we need to understand the scalability of your approach. Can these strategies work with institutional-level investments?" I clicked to the next slide of my presentation, showing the performance metrics of my investment fund. "Gentlemen, over the past 18 months, my fund has outperformed the S&P 500 by 847%. We've generated returns that your traditional portfolios simply cannot match, because we're operating in markets that most institutional investors still don't understand." The room fell silent. These were men who considered a 12% annual return exceptional, and I was showing them evidence of returns that seemed impossible by their standards. "That's an extraordinary claim," said Thomas Wright, their head of alternative investments. "What kind of position sizes are we talking about?" Currently, I manage approximately 90 million in assets under management, I replied, watching their expressions change. In the 6 weeks since my FBI partnership was announced, my fund had more than doubled in size. But I'm prepared to scale that to 500 million within the next 12 months, assuming I have the right institutional partnerships. Richard leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing? A joint venture. Sterling provides the regulatory framework and institutional credibility. I provide the expertise and proven strategies. We split the management fees 50-50, and Sterling gets access to returns that will make your traditional fund managers look like they're standing still. 2 hours later, I walked out of Sterling Capital with a signed letter of intent for a partnership that would revolutionize how institutional investors approach cryptocurrency. The deal was worth potentially hundreds of millions in management fees over the next 5 years. But the real power move came that afternoon, when I made a phone call I'd been planning for weeks. Gregory Whitman's office. This is Jennifer. This is Cassandra Sullivan. I'd like to schedule a meeting with Mr. Whitman to discuss acquiring some real estate assets. There was a pause. Jennifer clearly recognized my name. Miss Sullivan, I'll need to check Mr. Whitman's availability. May I ask what type of assets you're interested in? The penthouse at 432 Willowbrook Heights. I believe it's coming up for auction next week as part of the Ashford asset seizure. Another pause, longer this time. I'll have Mr. Whitman call you back within the hour. Gregory Whitman had been Damien's lawyer, the man who'd handled all our legal affairs during our marriage. He'd also been one of the first people to distance himself from me when the scandal broke. Now he was representing the government in liquidating our former assets to pay back Damien's victims. His return call came in 37 minutes. Cassandra, I have to say, I'm surprised to hear from you. I imagine you are, Gregory. I'm calling because I want to buy back my former home. Your former, Cassandra, the minimum bid on that property is $3.2 million. The government needs to maximize recovery for the victims. I'm prepared to bid $4 million, cash, closing within 30 days. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Cassandra, forgive me, but how exactly do you have $4 million in cash? That's not your concern, Gregory. Your concern is whether you're going to have the highest bid in the auction or not. I assume you'll want to verify my financial capacity before the sale. Of course, but... Excellent. I'll have my bank send you a proof of funds letter this afternoon. The money will be wired from my business account at Cayman National Bank. I could practically hear his jaw drop. The Cayman account held my cryptocurrency exchange profits. Perfectly legal, properly reported to the IRS, and completely untouchable by any of Damien's legal problems. Cassandra, I have to ask, how did you build a fortune while married to a criminal? Skill, Gregory, intelligence, and the wisdom to keep my business affairs separate from my personal life. Something you might want to recommend to your other clients. The auction was held the following Thursday at the Federal Building downtown. I arrived wearing a custom navy suit I'd had tailored for the occasion, carrying a leather briefcase that contained cashier's checks totaling $12 million. I wasn't just planning to buy back my penthouse, I was going to acquire several properties from Damien's seized assets. The viewing room was packed with real estate investors, former acquaintances who'd shunned me weeks ago, and reporters who'd gotten wind of my participation. I sat in the front row, calm and composed, while whispers circulated behind me. Lot 17, penthouse at 432 Willowbrook Heights, announced the auctioneer. Opening bid is $3.2 million. Several hands went up immediately. The penthouse was prime Manhattan real estate, and everyone knew it was worth far more than the opening bid. $3.4 million, $3.6 million, $3.8 million. When the bidding reached $3.9 million, only 2 other bidders remained, a real estate developer I recognized, and an investment firm representative. $4 million, I said clearly, raising my paddle. The room went silent. The developer hesitated, then shook his head. The investment firm representative looked at his phone, presumably checking with his principals, then also withdrew. 4 million going once, going twice, sold to bidder 47. I owned my former home again. But this time I'd bought it with money I'd earned myself, and the deed would be in my name alone. But I wasn't finished. Over the next 2 hours, I acquired 3 more properties from the Ashford seizure. The vacation house in Coral Bay for $1.8 million. A commercial building Damien had bought for his failed cryptocurrency venture for $2.2 million, and a luxury apartment building he'd purchased as an investment for $3.7 million. Total purchases, $11.7 million. All paid in cash, all legally mine. As I signed the final paperwork, I noticed Bethany and Priya from my former wives group standing near the exit, staring at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. When our eyes met, Bethany approached hesitantly. "Cassandra, we want to apologize for how we treated you when everything happened. We were scared and—" "You were protecting your own interests," I interrupted. "I understand, but I hope you've learned something from watching all this unfold." "What do you mean?" "I mean that the most dangerous thing a woman can do is assume her husband will always be there to provide for her. I spent 5 years building a safety net while married to a criminal, and it saved my life. How much have you built that belongs to you alone?" The question hung in the air as I walked away, my heels clicking confidently across the marble floor of the federal building. Behind me, I could hear Priya whispering urgently to Bethany about cryptocurrency investments and whether they should attend one of my seminars. That evening, I stood in the empty penthouse that had once been my prison of golden bars, looking out at the Manhattan skyline I now owned a piece of. Tomorrow, construction crews would begin renovating it to my new specifications. The master bedroom, where I'd slept next to a liar, would become my home office. The living room, where we'd entertained other couples with stolen money, would become a conference room for my legitimate business empire. But tonight, I simply stood in the space and marveled at how completely my life had transformed. 2 months ago, I'd been a naive wife with no idea her entire existence was built on lies. Now I was a millionaire entrepreneur with a growing empire, respected expertise, and the kind of independence I'd never imagined possible. Tomorrow, I would take the next step in my evolution. Because acquiring wealth and property was just the beginning. Now it was time to show the world what real power looked like. The attack came exactly 4 months after my FBI partnership was announced, and it was more sophisticated than anything I'd anticipated. I discovered it at 6:23 a.m. on a Tuesday, when my automated security alerts started flooding my phone with warnings about unusual activity across all my business accounts. "What the hell?" I muttered, grabbing my laptop from the nightstand of my newly renovated penthouse master suite. Someone had attempted to access my cryptocurrency exchanges, my investment fund management system, and even my social media accounts, all within a 30-minute window. The intrusion attempts had been blocked by my security protocols, but the coordinated timing suggested this wasn't random cybercrime, this was personal. My secure phone buzzed with an incoming call from Trevor Matthews, the cybersecurity expert I'd hired to protect my digital empire. "Cassandra, we have a problem. Someone just threw serious resources at trying to penetrate your systems." "How serious?" $1 million level hacking tools. Military-grade software. Whoever did this has backing from someone with very deep pockets and very specific motivations. I was already pulling up my monitoring dashboards, watching the digital footprints of the attack in real time. Any idea who? That's the interesting part. The attack vectors all trace back to a consulting firm called Meridian Recovery Solutions. Ring any bells? My blood turned to ice. Meridian Recovery Solutions was a, quote, reputation management company that specialized in destroying the credibility of people who threatened powerful interests. They were also owned by a subsidiary of Blackstone Holdings, the same investment group that controlled Meridian Financial, Damien's former employer. "Someone's trying to silence me," I said, my mind racing through the implications. "It gets worse. Trevor continued. They've also launched what looks like a coordinated disinformation campaign. Fake social media accounts are spreading rumors that your cryptocurrency success is actually a pyramid scheme. Someone leaked what they claim are your, quote, financial records showing massive losses. I was already seeing it unfold across my social media feeds. Accounts that had been created just hours ago were posting detailed threads exposing my business as a fraud. The fake financial documents looked convincing to anyone who didn't understand cryptocurrency accounting, showing my funds as worthless digital tokens instead of legitimate assets. But that wasn't the worst part. At 8:15 a.m., my lawyer Marcus Chen called with news that made my morning coffee taste like ash. Cassandra, I just received a court filing that's going to complicate everything. Damien's creditors are challenging your asset purchases from the auction. On what grounds? I paid fair market value with legitimately earned money. They're claiming you used marital assets to build your cryptocurrency portfolio. They've filed a motion arguing that any money you had during the marriage legally belonged to the marital estate, which means your victims have a claim to everything you've earned. I set down my coffee cup with deliberate control. That's insane. I built my business with my own inheritance years before Damien's crimes were committed. I know that, but they've hired Bradford & Associates to represent them. These aren't small-time creditors anymore. This is the Children's Hospital, the Cancer Research Foundation, and about a dozen other major charities that lost money in Damien's scheme. They're demanding a complete forensic audit of your finances going back 7 years. Bradford & Associates, the most expensive law firm in New York, specializing in asset recovery for high-profile cases. Someone had convinced the charities to pool their resources and go after me with everything they had. The coordinated timing wasn't a coincidence. Someone was orchestrating a multi-pronged attack designed to destroy my credibility, freeze my assets, and drag me back into the legal nightmare I'd escaped. 3 hours later, I was sitting across from Richard Blackstone in his corner office at Sterling Capital, watching him deliver the news I'd been dreading. Cassandra, I'm afraid we're going to have to postpone our partnership agreement pending resolution of these legal challenges. Richard, you know as well as I do that these claims are baseless. My financial records are completely transparent. Perhaps, but Sterling can't afford to be associated with potential litigation involving charitable fraud. Our reputation is paramount. He leaned back in his leather chair, studying me with the cold calculation I'd once found impressive. Of course, if these matters resolve quickly and in your favor, we'd be happy to revisit our arrangement. I kept my expression neutral, but inside I was seething. This was exactly what my attackers wanted, to isolate me from institutional support and force me to fight alone. The afternoon brought more bad news. 2 major cryptocurrency exchanges had temporarily suspended my trading accounts pending investigation of suspicious activity. My investment fund's banking relationships were suddenly under review. Several media outlets that had featured positive stories about my success were now running follow-up pieces questioning whether they'd been deceived. But the real betrayal came at 4:47 p.m. when I received an unexpected visitor at my penthouse. The doorman announced her as Ms. Victoria Pemberton, and it took me a moment to place the name. She was the daughter of Richard Pemberton, the client whose money Damien had stolen, the man whose charity foundation was now leading the legal assault against me. Victoria Pemberton was 35, impeccably dressed, and carried herself with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money. She was also, I realized as she settled into my living room, the real architect of the attack I was facing. Mrs. Ashford, she began, deliberately using my married name. I think we need to have a conversation. It's Ms. Sullivan now, and I can't imagine what we have to discuss. Can't you? She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made predators before they struck. Your husband stole $2.3 million from my father's charitable foundation. Money that was supposed to fund pediatric cancer research. Children died because that research was delayed. I had nothing to do with your husband's crimes. Perhaps not directly, but you certainly benefited from them, she gestured around my renovated penthouse. All of this luxury, all of your social positioning, all of the connections that helped you build your little crypto empire. It was all funded by stolen money. That's not true, and you know it. Do I? Because I've been investigating you for months, Miss Sullivan. Did you know that your first major cryptocurrency investment came just weeks after my father's money disappeared? Interesting timing, don't you think? The implication hit me like a physical blow. She was suggesting that I'd used Damien's stolen money to fund my initial crypto investments, which meant everything I'd built afterward was tainted by his crimes. I used my grandmother's inheritance for my first investments. I have documentation going back years. Documentation can be fabricated. Bank records can be manipulated. Especially when you have the kind of technical expertise you've demonstrated. She leaned forward. But here's what I'm really here to discuss: your future. My future? The legal challenges you're facing are just the beginning. I have the resources to keep you tied up in litigation for years. I can destroy your business relationships, undermine your credibility, and make sure you never recover from this scandal. She paused for effect. Or we can reach an arrangement. What kind of arrangement? You transfer your cryptocurrency holdings, all of them, into a charitable trust that will distribute the funds to the victims of your husband's crimes. In exchange, I'll withdraw the legal challenges and even arrange for some positive press about your cooperation with the recovery effort. I stared at her, finally understanding the full scope of what I was facing. This wasn't just about recovering stolen money. Victoria Pemberton wanted to destroy me as an example, to prove that people couldn't profit from association with financial crimes, even indirectly. And if I refuse, then I'll spend whatever it takes to prove that every dollar you've earned is tainted by your husband's theft. I'll drag you through courts until you're bankrupt, discredited, and forgotten. Her smile turned vicious. I have unlimited resources and unlimited patience. The question is whether you do. As she left my penthouse 20 minutes later, I stood at the window overlooking Central Park and realized that everything I'd built over the past 4 months was under existential threat. My enemies had studied my success, identified my vulnerabilities, and launched a coordinated assault designed to force me into surrender. But they'd made one critical mistake. They assumed that because they had more money and better connections, they automatically had more power. Tomorrow I was going to show them how wrong they were. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I spent 14 hours doing what I did best: analyzing data, tracking digital footprints, and building a strategy that would turn my enemies' strengths against them. By sunrise, I had constructed a counterattack that would either save my empire or destroy me completely. The first move came at 7:30 a.m. when I published a comprehensive blog post titled "The Truth About Coordination Attacks in the Digital Age." In it, I detailed every aspect of the assault on my business: the hacking attempts, the fake social media accounts, the legal challenges, and most importantly, the connections between all the players involved. I didn't just expose Victoria Pemberton's role in orchestrating the attack. I revealed the entire network. Meridian Recovery Solutions was owned by Blackstone Holdings, which had board members who also served on the Pemberton Foundation. Bradford and Associates had received over $2 million in legal fees from Blackstone-affiliated companies in the past year. The cryptocurrency exchanges that had frozen my accounts were investors in a fintech startup that competed directly with my investment fund. But the revelation that set social media on fire was the smoking gun I'd discovered at 3:17 a.m. Victoria Pemberton had purchased significant short positions against my investment fund through a shell company, meaning she would profit massively if my fund collapsed. She wasn't just seeking justice for charity victims, she was trying to make money by destroying me. This isn't about recovering stolen funds, I wrote. This is about a billionaire heiress using the tragedy of her father's losses to eliminate business competition and profit from my destruction. She's turned the victims of my ex-husband's crimes into weapons against an innocent woman who built her success completely independently. The post went viral within hours. #CassandraGate began trending as my followers and the broader crypto community rallied around the David versus Goliath narrative. But more importantly, it caught the attention of someone I'd been hoping to reach. At 11:43 a.m., my secure line rang with a call I'd been expecting. "Miss Sullivan, this is Agent Rebecca Torres. I think we need to talk." 30 minutes later, I was back in her FBI office, but this time the dynamic was completely different. Agent Torres didn't just see me as a cooperative witness anymore. She saw me as a potential ally in a much larger investigation. "Your blog post this morning has created quite a stir," she said, settling into her chair across from me, "particularly the part about market manipulation and securities fraud. I assume you verified the information I provided?" "We have, and we've also been investigating Meridian Recovery Solutions for other matters. Your situation has given us a very interesting window into their operations." She leaned forward. "Tell me about the hacking attempt yesterday." I spent the next hour walking Agent Torres through every detail of the cyber attack, providing her with the technical evidence Trevor and I had gathered. The sophistication of the tools, the coordination of the timing, the specific targeting of my business relationships, all of it painted a picture of a criminal conspiracy that went far beyond simple opposition research. "This is evidence of computer fraud, market manipulation, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes," Agent Torres concluded. "We can move on this immediately." "What do you need from me?" "Everything you've got. And I mean everything. Financial records, communication logs, digital forensics, your complete cooperation in a federal investigation into Victoria Pemberton and her associates." I smiled for the first time in 24 hours. "Agent Torres, I've been building a case file since 6 a.m. yesterday. I think you're going to find my documentation very thorough." The second phase of my counterattack launched at 2:15 p.m., when my lawyer Marcus Chen filed a federal lawsuit against Victoria Pemberton, Meridian Recovery Solutions, and Bradford and Associates for conspiracy, securities fraud, and cybercrime. But this wasn't just any lawsuit. It was a RICO case, alleging that they were operating as a criminal enterprise designed to manipulate financial markets through illegal means. The RICO filing was devastating because it meant that if we won, Victoria Pemberton could face criminal charges and forfeit her assets under racketeering laws. Suddenly, she was the one facing potential financial ruin. But the most devastating blow came at 4:47 p.m., exactly 24 hours after Victoria's visit to my penthouse. I'd spent months cultivating relationships in the crypto community, and now those relationships paid off in ways I'd never imagined. Ethereum founder Vitalik Buterin tweeted, "Coordinated attacks on legitimate crypto innovators threaten the entire industry. We stand with @CryptoQuinks against market manipulation." Michael Saylor from MicroStrategy followed minutes later. "Traditional finance trying to destroy crypto innovation through legal warfare. This is exactly why we need decentralized systems." But the tweet that changed everything came from an unexpected source: Elon Musk. Interesting blockchain forensics work from @CryptoQuinks. Shows the future of financial investigation. Traditional corruption can't hide from cryptographic truth. Within an hour, my follower count had grown by 500,000. My investment fund received $50 million in new deposits. 3 major cryptocurrency exchanges publicly announced they were reinstating my accounts and offering enhanced security services. The entire crypto industry was rallying around my story as a symbol of innovation under attack from old money interests. The media narrative shifted completely. Instead of charity fraud victim fights back, the story became crypto innovator exposes traditional finance corruption. Major publications began investigating Victoria Pemberton's business dealings, her family's political connections, and the questionable methods she'd used in other legal disputes. By evening, I was fielding calls from documentary filmmakers, book publishers, and speaking bureaus. My personal brand had evolved from scandal survivor to digital rights activist, and that transformation was worth far more than any individual business deal. But the real victory came at 8:23 p.m., when my phone rang with a call from Gregory Whitman, the same lawyer who'd handled Damien's asset seizure and tried to distance himself from me during the scandal. Cassandra, I'm calling on behalf of the Pemberton Foundation Board. They'd like to discuss a resolution to the current situation. A resolution? Gregory, they filed a lawsuit demanding all my assets less than 48 hours ago. Yes, well, circumstances have changed. The board has become aware of certain irregularities in how this matter has been handled. They're prepared to drop all claims against you in exchange for a public statement of mutual respect and cooperation. I almost laughed. That's very generous of them, but I'm afraid my position has changed as well. What do you mean? I mean that I'm no longer interested in just defending myself. I'm going on offense. I pulled up the federal court filing on my laptop. As of this afternoon, I've filed criminal complaints against Victoria Pemberton for market manipulation, cybercrimes, and conspiracy. The FBI has opened a formal investigation. I'm seeking not just vindication, but justice. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Cassandra, surely we can find a way to resolve this without this level of escalation. Gregory, they tried to destroy my life, steal my assets, and profit from my failure. They used the victims of my ex-husband's crimes as weapons against me. They committed federal crimes to try to silence a woman who built success through legitimate means. My voice was steel. There is no resolution. There is only accountability. After I hung up, I stood in my penthouse office, the same room where Damien had confessed his crimes 4 months ago, and marveled at how completely the tables had turned. Then, I'd been a victim of circumstances beyond my control. Now I was the architect of my enemy's destruction. But this was still just the beginning. Tomorrow, I would show Victoria Pemberton and everyone watching what happened when you underestimated a woman who'd learned to fight back with both traditional power and revolutionary technology. The war was far from over, but I'd just won the battle that mattered most. The battle for control of the narrative. 3 months after my counterattack decimated Victoria Pemberton's conspiracy, I was standing on the stage of the Javits Center, addressing 12,000 women at the inaugural Financial Independence Summit. The irony of the location wasn't lost on me. This was the same venue where Damien and I had attended charity galas, where I'd played the role of devoted society wife while he schemed and stole behind my back. Ladies, let me ask you a question, I said into the microphone, my voice carrying across the massive auditorium. How many of you have ever said the phrase, I don't understand money, or I'm not good with numbers? Thousands of hands shot up, accompanied by rueful laughter. I smiled, remembering the woman I'd been just 8 months ago, someone who'd relegated financial decisions to her husband while focusing on flower arrangements and dinner parties. I used to say those exact words. I spent 8 years married to a man I thought was a financial genius, never questioning where our wealth came from, never building my own expertise, never imagining I could create something independent of his success. I paused, letting that sink in. That ignorance almost destroyed me, but it also saved me, because it forced me to discover who I really was. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. These weren't just crypto enthusiasts or seasoned investors. They were women from every walk of life who'd been inspired by my story to take control of their financial futures. 8 months ago, I lost everything I thought I owned, but I discovered something worth far more than any mansion or jewelry collection. The knowledge that I could build wealth through my own intelligence, create security through my own skills, and design a life that belonged entirely to me. As I spoke, I could see familiar faces in the VIP section. Rita, from the Starlight Motel, sat in the front row, now a successful crypto investor who managed a portfolio worth 6 figures. She'd taken my advice about small investments, attended my online courses, and transformed her financial life completely. Beside her sat Dr. Jennifer Martinez, the pediatric oncologist who'd become the unlikely bridge between my world and Victoria Pemberton's downfall. I'd met Jennifer 2 months ago, when she'd reached out to tell me about the real impact of Damien's charity theft. Unlike Victoria Pemberton, who'd used the victims as props in her power play, Jennifer had been working directly with the children, whose treatments had been delayed. Her research lab had lost crucial funding, but instead of seeking revenge, she'd approached me with a proposition. "Ms. Sullivan," she'd said during our first meeting, "I don't care about legal battles or media wars. I care about funding research that saves children's lives. If you're truly committed to making amends for your ex-husband's crimes, I have a way you can do it that actually matters." That conversation had led to the creation of the CryptoMed Foundation, a blockchain-based charitable organization that used cryptocurrency donations to fund medical research with complete transparency. Every transaction was recorded on a public ledger, every dollar could be traced from donor to recipient, and every research outcome was publicly documented. The foundation had raised $37 million in its first 2 months of operation, funded breakthrough research in 3 different childhood diseases, and created a model for charitable giving that eliminated the possibility of the kind of fraud Damien had committed. But more than that, it had given me something I'd never had before, a purpose that went beyond personal success. The CryptoMed Foundation isn't just about funding research, I continued my speech. It's about proving that women can create solutions to problems that traditional institutions have failed to solve. It's about using technology to build trust in systems that have been corrupted by greed and secrecy. As I spoke about the foundation, I caught sight of someone in the audience who made my heart skip drive. Alexander Chen, the blockchain researcher from MIT, who'd helped me design the foundation's technological infrastructure. Alex wasn't related to my lawyer Marcus Chen. He was a brilliant computer scientist who'd been following my work since my early crypto investments. We'd been collaborating professionally for months, but our relationship had evolved into something deeper over late-night strategy sessions and shared missions to revolutionize charitable giving. Alex understood both my technical expertise and my personal journey in ways that few people could. Unlike my marriage to Damien, which had been built on my admiration for his success and status, my relationship with Alex was grounded in mutual respect for each other's intelligence and shared commitment to using technology for social good. He challenged my ideas, improved my strategies, and supported my ambitions without trying to control or diminish them. The beautiful thing about blockchain technology, I continued, is that it makes lies impossible. Every transaction is permanent. Every claim is verifiable. Every promise is kept or publicly broken. In a world where women have been told we can't trust our own judgment about money, we now have tools that make trust unnecessary. The applause was thunderous, but I wasn't finished yet. The final announcement I was about to make would reshape my business empire completely. Today, I'm announcing the next evolution of my work. Starting January 1st, I'm launching the Sullivan Institute for Women's Financial Technology, a nonprofit organization that will provide free cryptocurrency education, business mentorship, and startup funding for women-led fintech companies. The audience erupted in cheers, but I raised my hand for silence. This institute will be funded by my personal donation of $25 million from my cryptocurrency portfolio, along with partnerships from major tech companies and financial institutions. I'd made the decision 3 weeks ago, during a conversation with Alex about legacy and impact. My investment fund was generating more money than I could spend in several lifetimes, but more importantly, I'd realized that my greatest satisfaction came not from accumulating wealth, but from empowering other women to build their own. The old model of financial security, marry a successful man and hope he takes care of you, failed my generation and will fail yours. The new model is simple. Learn the skills, build a portfolio, create the independence, and never again depend on anyone else for your security. As I concluded my speech to a standing ovation, I felt a profound sense of completion. The woman who'd stood in a dingy motel room 8 months ago, broken and homeless, had been transformed into someone who could command the attention of thousands and deploy millions of dollars to change lives. But the real transformation wasn't about money or status, it was about purpose. I discovered that my greatest power wasn't my ability to generate wealth. It was my capacity to help other women recognize their own potential. After the speech, Alex found me backstage, his face glowing with pride and something deeper. "That was incredible, Cassandra. You're going to change thousands of lives." "We're going to change thousands of lives," I corrected, taking his hand. "This is just the beginning." As we walked together toward the reception where Rita, Dr. Martinez, and dozens of other women I'd mentored were waiting to celebrate, I realized that everything I'd lost in my marriage's destruction had been replaced by something infinitely more valuable: a network of relationships built on genuine respect, shared purpose, and mutual empowerment. I'd started this journey as a woman fleeing from betrayal. I was ending it as a leader creating the future. 1 year and 18 days after I'd been forced from my penthouse with 2 suitcases and $800 in cash, I stood in the marble lobby of the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan, watching Victoria Pemberton emerge from her sentencing hearing in handcuffs. The irony of our reversed positions wasn't lost on me. A year ago, I'd been the one facing potential criminal charges while she'd seemed untouchable. "Miss Sullivan, any comment on the verdict?" called out a reporter from the Financial Times. I adjusted the collar of my navy blazer, custom-tailored, but purchased with money I'd earned through legitimate business success, and stepped forward to address the assembled media. Today's sentencing sends a clear message that market manipulation, cybercrime, and conspiracy to commit fraud will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, regardless of how much money or influence the perpetrators believe they have. Victoria Pemberton had been sentenced to 7 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $45 million in restitution to the victims of her conspiracy. Her conviction on all 14 counts had been devastating and complete. The RICO case I'd initiated had exposed not just her attack on me, but an entire network of illegal market manipulation schemes she'd been running for years. "Ms. Sullivan, how does it feel to know that your ex-husband's crimes ultimately led to exposing an even larger conspiracy?" I paused, considering the question. My ex-husband's betrayal was devastating, but it forced me to discover strengths I never knew I had. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing you ever accomplish. As the reporters dispersed, I noticed a familiar figure approaching from across the courthouse plaza. Damien walked slowly, his designer suits replaced by the simple clothing of a man whose world had collapsed. He'd been released from federal prison 3 months ago, after serving his full sentence and cooperating with multiple investigations. We hadn't spoken since the morning he'd confessed his crimes in our penthouse study. Seeing him now, gray-haired, thinner, carrying himself with the defeated posture of a man who'd lost everything, I felt something I hadn't expected: pity. "Cassandra," he said quietly as he approached, "I saw the news about the verdict. Congratulations." "Thank you." I studied his face, searching for traces of the man I'd once loved. "What are you doing here?" "I've been following your work. The foundation, the institute, everything you've built." He looked down at his hands. "I wanted to apologize, not for what I did to myself, but for what I did to you, for making you doubt your own worth, your own capabilities. I don't need your apology, Damien. I know, but I need to give it." He met my eyes for the first time. "The woman you've become. She's extraordinary. But she was always there, wasn't she? I just spent 8 years trying to make you smaller, so I could feel bigger." I felt Alex's presence beside me before I saw him. He'd been waiting respectfully at a distance, giving me space to handle this encounter on my own terms. Now he stepped forward, not possessively but supportively, ready to intervene if needed. "This is Dr. Alexander Chen," I said, introducing them. "Alex, this is Damien." The two men shook hands briefly. The contrast between them was striking. Alex radiated the quiet confidence of someone comfortable with his own achievements, while Damien carried the hollow emptiness of a man who'd gambled everything and lost. "I should go," Damien said. I wanted you to know that I'm proud of what you've accomplished. And I'm sorry it took losing you for me to understand what I'd had." As he walked away, disappearing into the crowd of Lower Manhattan, I felt the final chapter of that part of my life closing. There was no anger left, no bitterness, no desire for additional revenge. There was only the profound gratitude of a woman who'd discovered that her greatest strength had been hidden beneath years of playing a role that was too small for her. "You okay?" Alex asked quietly. "More than okay." I took his hand as we walked toward the waiting car. "Ready to go home?" Home was the penthouse I'd bought back and completely renovated, but it was also so much more than that. Home was the office where my team of 12 employees managed the Sullivan Institute's programs for women's financial education. Home was the research lab where the CryptoMed Foundation's latest grants were funding breakthrough treatments for pediatric diseases. Home was the community of thousands of women who'd transformed their financial lives through the programs I'd created. 3 hours later, I was standing in my office, the former master bedroom where I'd once slept beside a criminal, reviewing the quarterly reports that told the story of my complete transformation. The Sullivan Institute had granted $8.2 million in startup funding to women-led fintech companies in the past 6 months alone. Our free cryptocurrency education programs had reached 180,000 women across 47 countries. The CryptoMed Foundation had funded research that led to 2 breakthrough treatments now in clinical trials. My personal investment fund, which had started as my secret survival mechanism, now managed $340 million in assets and consistently outperformed traditional hedge funds by margins that made institutional investors reconsider their entire approach to cryptocurrency markets. But the numbers that mattered most were different. 1,247 women had achieved financial independence through my programs. 89 female-founded startups were thriving with my institute's support. 23 children's lives had been saved by research funded through the CryptoMed Foundation. "The final Bloomberg interview went live an hour ago," announced Sarah Kim, my communications director, as she entered the office with her tablet. "It's already trending in 3 countries." The interview had been my first comprehensive retrospective on the past year, a chance to tell the complete story of how a woman who'd lost everything had built something far greater than what she'd lost. But more importantly, it had been an opportunity to share the strategic blueprint other women could follow to protect themselves from the kind of betrayal I'd experienced. "Any interesting responses?" I asked. Rita shared it with the caption, "From motel neighbors to millionaire mentors, anything is possible." It's got 50,000 retweets already. I smiled, thinking of Rita and the dozens of other women whose lives had intersected with mine during my darkest period and who'd become part of my chosen family. These relationships, built on mutual support and shared growth rather than social status or financial gain, were worth more than any material success I'd achieved. My phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Dinner reservation confirmed for 8 p.m., celebrating your Bloomberg cover story properly tonight." As I looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline I'd once viewed as a prisoner in a golden cage, I marveled at how completely my relationship with this city had transformed. Where I'd once seen a playground for the wealthy elite, I now saw a landscape of opportunity for any woman willing to learn the skills and take the risks necessary to build her own empire. The woman who'd stood in this same spot a year ago, begging a criminal husband to explain why he'd destroyed their life, was gone completely. In her place stood someone I'd never imagined I could become: a leader, a teacher, an innovator, and a woman whose greatest achievement wasn't the wealth she'd accumulated but the lives she'd changed. Tomorrow, I would wake up and continue building the future I'd envisioned, a world where women never again had to depend on others for their financial security, where technology served justice rather than deception, and where betrayal became the catalyst for transformation rather than destruction. But tonight, I would celebrate the completion of the most important project of my life, becoming exactly